Hey photographers, welcome to the Bokeh Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz, and really I'm just here to help you build a sustainable photography business. That certainly means helping you improve your photographic skills and enabling you to become a stronger business owner, but it also means helping you work more efficiently so you don't get burnt out in the long run. We are sponsored by photographersedit.com, custom photo editing for the professional photographer, and Miilu.com, that's MIILU.com, the simplest way to create and manage timelines and shot lists for the events you're photographing. All right, let's get into today's episode. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're back for a brand new Bokeh Podcast episode, and one of the few return guests that we've had on the show, Dauss Miller, is here with me again today. Dauss, thanks for hanging out with me. We worked through a bunch of technical issues, and we're making this happen.
Yes. Glad to be here, Nathan.
Well, and just for everybody listening in, if you're not familiar with Dauss, you didn't get to hear episode 256. We're going to link to that in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. We talked about how to direct powerful portraits. So if that topic interests you, or you just want to get to know Dauss a little bit more, go back to that episode. Again, we'll link to that in the show notes. But to follow up on our conversation just a little bit, Dauss, one of the things that I don't think we talked about in that first episode, it's something that you mentioned in your Instagram bio, actually, which for everybody listening in is Dauss, D-A-U-S-S, photo, F-O-T-O. You say that you're an ice cream addict, and I have to at least ask you, what kind of ice cream is your favorite?
Oh, man. It's funny. Actually, these days, I'm really trying to cut back on sugar and dairy, so it's been a real struggle.
I bet.
But my ultimate favorite is Haagen-Dazs coffee. If I'm not making it at home or dabbling in recipes myself, it's Haagen-Dazs coffee. If I get a pint of that, it's nearly impossible to put down once I get started. So yeah, try not to buy it.
Straight up coffee, no like chocolate chunks or anything like that, just straight coffee.
Yeah, usually I feel like the chunks kind of take away from the experience for me. Like I'm like, it's kind of like, if you're a connoisseur of anything, you don't want anything muddling up the experience.
Fair.
So unless I'm getting extra crazy, I just really prefer the smooth, solo experience of the Haagen-Dazs.
Okay. All right.
It's so dense, and man, now I got to go get some, I think.
Well, but you also mentioned, do you actually make some of your own ice cream at home?
Yeah. But before I was a photographer 100%, I've always done it, behind the scenes, and along the way. But I was a district manager for a national ice cream company. And due to my passion for it, and did really well in that company and created a lot of recipes that went national back in the day. So,
really?
It's really fun to have that and do it at home on occasion. Is
the name of the company secret? Can we talk about it?
Oh, no, it's I'm not even sure if they're around anymore. It's Maggie Moo International.
Okay. I worked for Baskin Robbins way back in the day. In fact, my first retail job actually was Baskin Robbins, and just serving
Nice.
ice cream, and of course getting the free samples here and there as well. But
Yep.
I'm with you on loving ice cream. In fact, my kind of theoretical goal at the moment, as far as having cheap food, sugary food, because I'm also trying to manage it a little bit more effectively, is like a cheap meal on Sunday. So the idea is, whatever it might be, pizza for the meal. And then my go-to as of late has been a pint of ice cream, and I tend to go to Ben & Jerry's. Do you have a favorite Ben & Jerry's?
Oh man, I've got a few. There's a cheesecake. What was it? There's some sort of cheesecake one that I was really into for a minute, but yeah, I don't recall. I've really honestly have been trying to steer clear of all of that because I was noticing it was affecting my life
Fair enough.
Negative ways,
and here we are tempting you further. Okay, well we'll take a step back from that. As I mentioned earlier, for everybody listening in, we had Dauss on the show back episode 256, so it's been a little while, but some of the questions that I normally ask at the beginning of the show, we touched on there, so make sure you go back and listen to that episode if you haven't heard it. One of the things we didn't talk about specifically, Dauss, I don't think, is this question about customer experience. And I'm curious if, in fact, our major topic of conversation today has to do with customer experience. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But if you were to pinpoint one thing, one big idea that you think has made a big difference for you in providing a great customer experience for your clients, what would that one big idea be?
Really just honing into the client and, making sure I understand who they are and where they come from and what connected them to me, making the connection personal, has, really, really changed my business and my client experience. So it makes each experience unique, and personal. And that's really, taking things a long way.
Okay. And we're going to talk more specifically about how you do that here in just a little bit. But before we do, a couple more questions for you. We talked about time management in the last episode that we did together. I don't know that we really touched a whole lot on the concept of delegation or outsourcing. And of course, this is relevant to editing or album design or administrative tasks. I mean, there's a whole long list of things that we could potentially delegate. Is this something you've experienced with or experimented with, I should say, or had experience with in your business?
Yeah, absolutely. Like with time management is a big part of everything. Like if you can be efficient and smart with your time, and making space and time for yourself as a business owner, the more enjoyable it's going to be and the more efficiently your business can run. So first, understanding where my time goes is really important and a big step, like initially, and knowing where there's opportunity. Like a big thing that I would do, and I kind of regularly do, is in assessing what I do with my time, is I create a not to-do list. We're so used to making, itemized to-do lists, but it became really important to me to create a not to-do list and, making sure that I absolutely don't mess with them. And those are either outsource items or things that I just completely take out. Like if they're not serving me or my business positively, then they just get removed or delegated if it's something that has to stick.
A not to-do list. That's good. Can you give me an example of something that would be on that list for you?
Been for me is batch editing. Like it's finding an outsource relationship isn't difficult. Someone that dials into my style and creates a consistent product is really all it comes down to. And then if I need to make any personal or tweaks or retouching on the back end, it's super easy to kind of step in, but it cuts, it literally cuts 8, 10, 15 hours out of the process. So it's kind of a no-brainer. It's like, that's net time right off the bat, easy peasy. It's like, just get it off the list and outsource it.
Yeah. It's so interesting. And I'm glad you pointed this out, the amount of time, because the numbers that you just threw out there are numbers that I usually use as well. Anywhere from, let's just call it a range from 8 to as much as 16 or 20 hours. If somebody was like, if somebody came to me, let's just say I was working for a retail company of some kind, and I was working a 40-hour week, and they said to me, hey, guess what? You can make almost the same amount of money this week, but work half the amount of hours. Would you like that option?
Yes, please.
I would be crazy not to say yes, right? And put the extra little bit of investment necessary in place to make that thing happen. Because yeah, sure, outsourcing the editing, for example, of a wedding might cost $150 or $200. But the fact that I would literally get half my week back is a mind-blowing concept that for whatever reason, some photographers still fight against. And, to each his own in the end. But I'm so passionate about time because of my childhood experience with regards to time and relationships, how that affected me. I want to make sure that I personally have as much flexibility in my life as a business owner as possible. And so delegation is important to me. And I want photographers listening in and others in the industry to also have that kind of freedom and flexibility, both for the sake of relationships and also for the sake of then being able to focus the time they do spend on their business on the things that actually grow their business. Outsourcing or delegating editing work is the fast track to having that kind of freedom and that flexibility. So I'm so glad you highlight that.
Yeah, it's the big easy one to check off the list.
Yeah,
it really is. Everything else, like I dig into first understanding like what my hourly rate is and figuring out my cost of doing business, so I know what my hourly rate is, and then anything that's like that doesn't make sense for me to spend my time on. I start to explore avenues to outsource it or how else I can delegate it so it's not taking up my personal time. Because working on my business is more important. Coming up with creative marketing strategies or designing new ads or that are much more important for me to do than fielding lead questions that don't make sense or
Sure.
anything else like that. So.
Well, I love the way that you frame that, and for everybody listening in, take it to heart. I mean, when you consider how much of your life you can get back, if you're just willing to give up a bit of control, it makes so much difference in your business and your personal life. It's worth at least giving it a shot. So, highly recommend that. Now, yes. I want to get to the next question. I asked you before in the previous episode that we did together about a favorite book, one that's made an impact in your life. You actually listed a number of them, and I'll just mention them here again. One was Crushing It by Gary Vaynerchuk. Another was Start With Why by Simon Sinek. It's been a super popular one here on the podcast. Another was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which has also been a popular one here on the podcast. And then Simon Sinek's TED Talk as well, I think tied to that Start With Why conversation. We'll link to all these in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. But I'm curious, since we last talked, is there another book that you would want to throw into that mix?
I might get in trouble. I'm a heavy reader, so coming up with one is really tough.
Oh man, throw out 3 or 5 or 10. Go for it. Yeah.
Awesome. It's a part of my self-care routine. It's really important. And
yes.
Like having a solid morning routine and all of that. Captivate by Vanessa Van Edwards has been a really, really had a big impact on me. I've got a little bit of like social anxiety sometimes and some, things that pop up for me. So
sure.
Coming up with ways to connect with people has been a game changer for me.
So is that the premise there about captivating the attention of the person on the other side of you, or what's the premise?
Yeah, basically ways to have engaging conversations, and keeping it interesting and creative and not daunting for you or the other person. It's really illustrates some really creative ways to have small talk, but not, like valuable relationships and conversations outside of just touching on communication. It's like it really digs deep and it gives you some really easy ways to get there, comfortable ways to get there.
Okay. This is interesting. And I, in fact, I just pulled it up on Amazon too. And the Kindle edition with audio and video is only $5. So it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I've been actually in the process of reading a series of books on communication because it's something that I want to continue to do better at. So I'm definitely adding this one to my list. That's great. You were about to say another one though.
Yeah. The Art of Thinking Clearly.
Okay.
By Rolf Dobelli has been, having these resources to kind of, bounce around in your mind as things come up in life or in business is just, it's been invaluable. And I'm an artist and creative, obviously, and being organized in my thoughts and in my processes is always a challenge. So having things, from a third party perspective to kind of help me work through narrowing my times or being more strategic in my attack or, just getting some help and tools, like learning some new tools. And sometimes it's a simple shift of perspective that gets you through things or helps you break through a pattern or things that create issues for you.
Yeah, I'm actually, I pulled the book up on Amazon as well. And the description on the back of the book, it really frames it in an interesting way. It says, we are all guilty of cognitive biases, simple errors we make in day-to-day thinking, but by knowing what they are and how to identify them, we can avoid them and make better choices. That sounds like a really fascinating read.
It is, man. It's good.
All right. I'm adding that to my list now too.
Good. I've got 2 more.
Go for it.
2 more that I think are really powerful. The Illusion of Money by Kyle Cease.
The Illusion of Money?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And then Unfuck Yourself by Gary John Bishop.
Yes. That sounds eerily similar to another book that I read. Let's see. Okay, I don't think I have that one currently in my library. Okay, Unfuck Yourself by Gary John Bishop. Get out of your head and into your life. That sounds like something that I need.
Yeah, me too. The constant reminder, like get out of your head and into your heart and into the reality. It's like where stuff happens.
Interesting. Okay, so can you give me, if you don't mind, just give me an idea, like a specific example, because man, this is definitely something I can relate to. An example of how you kind of get stuck internally and that keeps you from doing, because I mean, I've been guilty of this time and time again. It's easy to have an idea. It's another thing to actually do something about that idea. And one of the things that gets in the way most often is this crazy brain of ours that we get stuck just kind of rolling around in there. So what does that look like for you?
It's constant. I mean, I'm a hyper creative person. So I've got idea, and my fiance, we're both like uber creative people and like grand visions, so there's all these enormous, heavy produced ideas that come about all the time. And it's like, we end up bouncing around and some of them fall off, some of them don't. And, it's really tough sometimes to sink back down into reality and like, figuring out ways to truly like implement ideas that don't take millions of dollars and a team of 100,000 people to make it work, So, but outside of that, like just for me personally, things as simple as social media posts sometimes, or stories or reels now on Instagram. It's like I'll get a cool idea to jump in and do something, and I'll get caught up in exactly what I'm going to say, or what text should I put on the screen? Just logistically, things start to get in the way of the grand creative vision that I had initially. So, you waste a lot of time with those sometimes mundane details in between when sometimes it's better to just dive in and keep that creative cusp to push you through instead of allowing yourself to think yourself out of the whole process, which is, one of my inner critic sabotage ways to keep me from doing things. Mm-hmm. So,
Well, I think one of the things that helps too, and this is actually something that I want to do a better job. I'm going to do a better job of. You all heard it here, listeners. I'm committing to this. As much as I talk about task and project management, one of the most important concepts of implementing a good task and project management system is breaking down a project into multiple tasks or steps. Otherwise, you see that big thing that you want to get done, but you're just looking at that big thing as one task. And it really isn't. It's probably 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 different tasks or steps that are required to accomplish that one big thing. I'm in the process right now, really, I guess, of beginning to launch 3 new businesses, 3 new companies. And there are, in addition to everything else that I'm already doing. And so how does that going to happen? Well, the most effective way for me anyway is to create each of those business launches as a project in the system that I use. It's called Todoist. And then under those projects, create tasks and potentially subtasks as next steps that I can then easily jump to. I accomplish one day, that's awesome. The next day, the next one in line, I knock that out. And I can just do it one step at a time. And at the very least, it's less overwhelming when it's all broken down that way. And I may have less excuses or reason to, again, get stuck in my head and not actually accomplish that thing just by breaking it up into smaller pieces. What do you think about that?
Nice. Yeah, that's great. Great point. Most things that we make a big mountain out of can be broken down into multiple steps that are more digestible. And I feel like most artists are project based. So breaking things down into smaller projects with giving yourself an action plan and a time limit or whatever to complete it is a great way to get through it.
Well, and I think what I'm realizing too in that regard, and just a little bonus content here, but just a thought, and maybe you have a particular way you approach this too, Dauss, but for me personally, as I'm trying to think big picture and play more the role of a CEO than I have been, because it really is easy to get kind of stuck in the day-to-day, but look at the big picture, think big picture, and then of course delegate like we were talking about earlier. I need to do a lot of planning, even down to what we were just talking about, creating that project into Todoist and breaking it down into multiple steps. It takes a little bit of time. When I get into my work week though, I'm kind of going this week in particular. It's been go from one thing to the next, and I don't have as much time to do that planning work. So I think I'm gonna have to set aside, like, just kind of block off my Saturday mornings, for example, as a planning segment, and then use that time frame to do that planning work. Do you take certain times of the day, week, month, year to do planning like that?
Yeah, definitely. It's a part of organizing myself. I think it's important to kind of assess what you have to do. And the more, the things that are going to take more effort or time or energy or focus, they definitely go way up on my priority list. So if I have a big project that I need to get organized on and come up with an action item list or whatever, and plan it out, that goes, high up on my priority list. And I block that, usually like Mondays are kind of like my organization office kind of day. And I spoke our last interview podcast before, I spoke about breaking things up into 3-hour chunks. So those things would go into my first 3-hour chunk on Monday to make sure it gets done. Because if it's like, if you leave it in that area of, okay, after I do this or that and I'll get to it later in the day, by the time you get to it, it's like, you have too much time to talk yourself out of it. Number one, your energy isn't as high. You're not quite as sharp. So it's best to kind of nail those things and get them off the list early on.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Those kind of picking a set of tasks that you focus on first thing. Also something that I need to, I mean, I running a business, being a human being for that matter, it's an ongoing process. And I certainly have a list of things that I need to continue to work at. And this task and project management, as I have more and more kind of added to my plate, is something that I need to do a better job of, I guess, refining. Because I've got a system of sorts, but I could always be better. And the last thing that I want is I take on more brands and get involved in building more brands, build more companies. Is for that then to eat up my life. I have no interest in being, Gary Vaynerchuk or any list of other people who spend 60, 80 hours a week working and just kind of don't do anything else. That's not the life that I want. That's not why I'm an entrepreneur. But I know that I can have that kind of freedom and flexibility if I'm intentional about the systems that I put in place. So anyway, this has been a pretty interesting point of conversation, but I want to keep going because we have a pretty major topic to dig into here. And in kind of conversation previous to our interview today, the title that I came up with, at least tentatively, was Client Experience Beyond a CRM. And this title I came up with based on kind of your ideas about what you thought we could get into. But I think it's a really interesting premise. CRMs, we've talked about CRMs on the podcast previously. They're wonderful, wonderful tools, kind of like task and project management systems that kind of help first of all, help us organize what it is that we do. And CRMs can be really great these days in that they help us automate our workflow. That's really great. But there's something about stepping beyond the CRM and still maintaining a sense of personalization that I think is required, especially of sole proprietors who are trying to create a brand in order to provide, number one, the best possible experience for their clients, but ultimately to build a following. And so for you, I know that you said one of the ways that kind of starts, or really the way that it starts, is with cold leads. And honestly, even that phrase "cold leads" to me is a bit of a foreign concept as it relates to running a photography business, at least in 2020. Back in the day, like actually when I started, Dauss, there were, I mean, yellow pages was the thing, right? And people might literally flip through the yellow pages and see our name and call us based on that. To me, that seems like a cold lead. What do you mean by cold lead, and how do you engage with a cold lead to really kind of warm them up to the Dauss photo experience?
Yeah, well, a cold lead is anyone that doesn't know me or my brand yet. They've just come across my brand or via an ad or word of mouth. They don't know much about what the experience is. So that person is cold to the idea of being a client. They don't really know the benefit or the value of it just yet.
Okay, fair enough. So, and the reason I said that to me that was a foreign concept in 2020 is because I assume, and this is probably way too broad an assumption, but I assume that many, if not most, of the leads that at least established business owners get are references from their clients or vendors that they're associated with, family, friends, whoever it might be, but they're references. So they're at least slightly warm leads. what percentage of the leads that you get are totally cold leads where they just did a Google search or a search on Instagram and found you that way?
These days, I would say, I don't know, it's pretty low.
Okay.
Maybe 15, 20%.
Okay.
Of total. But my process now is I kind of send out like a broadcast reel to bring in a swarm of leads that are cold that I don't have to necessarily engage with personally. So with email campaigns and drip campaigns and sending out information via PDFs and video clips and things like that, so that it's running them through the lead process, warming them up, so that by the time they do contact me, they know pretty much everything I want them to know about my brand and about my business. So it just kind of nurtures them through the process. So it kind of starts with cold leads, but I don't really have to manage or deal with it like directly.
Okay, I see. And you mentioned running ads as well. Do you actively run Facebook ads to generate cold leads?
I do. It's a really powerful tool, and it's Facebook collects data points. I can't remember the number, but an uncomfortable amount of data points about all of us.
Sure.
And it can be something that my fiance and I discuss, or we send a text message link between each other, and all of a sudden, moments later, I'm getting an ad from something that she was talking about.
Yeah.
A few minutes before. So the targeting and all of the it's a really powerful tool, and it of everything available, it just doesn't make sense to avoid it. So I definitely make use of it.
Yeah, that's such a loaded topic. I mean, the privacy issues associated with that platform. Yeah. But to your point, I mean, it's an available tool. I know that Facebook is continuing in one form or another to try to refine their process to make sure that people have a choice in how much of their data is being shared. Of course, we're also making the choice, and this is something that really isn't discussed enough, I don't think. We're making the choice to spend time on this platform and then upset that they're using our behavior on their platform that we are choosing to use, that they're using that as a means of targeting ads. I think there's some irony in that. But that aside, it is a powerful platform. You're right. I mean, I was just reviewing an ad campaign that we're running for Photographers Edit. And I won't go into specific numbers at the moment, but double-digit return on investment using Facebook. It's super, super, super powerful, and kind of mind-blowing at times, actually, how good it really can be. Is there something that you're doing, though, in this process of, whether it's through an email campaign or Facebook ad or otherwise, drawing in these cold leads that at least gives a touch of warmth or personalization to that process of bringing in the cold lead?
Absolutely. That's what it's all about, really. Creating ad or kind of sending out a hook of some sort to catch the interest of my ideal bride. So she is intrigued enough to click. So she's going to receive value from me. She's going to get some questions answered that she's already got, or maybe she doesn't even know she has, So she's going to click to receive my a link to a private video or a hidden blog post on my website or something like that. So she's going to receive some value. But the beautiful thing for me is that once she clicks and opts in, I have her information then to continue marketing to her for free. So I don't have to continue to pay to reach that particular person. So I kind of do advertising or paid ads on Facebook or Instagram or whatever in waves, and I get to decide when it's when it makes sense to, and I gather 50, 100, 200 new leads, and then into my lead funnel, and I can market to them free via emails and text messages that I'm sending more value, but I kind of have a cycle of content that I send them that goes through, value, and then I, give them a call to action that makes sense to kind of edge toward conversion at some point.
Yeah.
But the idea is that I'm giving them all the information that I used to spend in meetings, educating them on, my process, or, explaining how a shoot works. So now they're getting all that information up front via behind the scenes content, or, blog posts that they get to experience, emails, information, links to different things to educate, or to, provide resources, as far as other vendors, or, things to think about for their wedding day, all kinds of things that I just get to kind of take off my list, to have to initiate or dive into during meetings later.
Okay, but it starts with that lead magnet, which in this case is a PDF with some information. So you pointed out, you used that word value earlier. You're adding value to their life right off the bat. You're giving them something at no cost to them, other than their email address, which has benefit. It answers questions. It gives them some type of assistance in what it is that they're doing as a bride or a groom. And that's kind of a starting place, which is an interesting segue, I think, to my next question, which has to do with education and expectation, because this is something else that you said is a part of what you do, this education piece. I would personally say that expectation management, in particular, education to go along with that, of, what is it like to use Dauss Photo? What is it like to use Dauss Photo specifically on the wedding day? What am I to expect about this process? What does it look like? What will I get as a final product? Will we have meetings? I mean, the endless list of questions associated with that experience. We as photographers have not just the opportunity, but the responsibility, I think, to effectively manage the expectations of our clients and potential clients by educating them about how things work. And so to that end, you mentioned to me three things actually before we started recording today: questionnaires, emails, and meetings being kind of three touch points where you're able to more effectively educate your clients. Can you break down how you educate your clients with each of those things?
Yeah. So it's really important to get all the information I can. So questionnaires are a really, really big part of my process.
Yeah.
So that way I understand, where they're coming from. I have all the details. I have their preferences, personal things that they do with their free time. I get all the information that I get to use to tailor their experience down the road. So, when it comes to pre-wedding day, bringing a gift to the wedding or sending a gift to them before the wedding, I get to choose from my list that I've developed at that point through powerful questions from questionnaire and conversations that I've had that were piqued or sparked from questions from a questionnaire. So it's really invaluable for me on my end to make sure to ask those powerful questions so I can use them throughout their experience. And most times people don't realize that I'm gathering information and I'm data entering all of their details. So it's relaxed and comfortable for them. They don't realize it's a part of my process, but it happens to be one of the most intricate parts of the process. So I'm kind of just giving back their own information and unexpected gifts and perks and things show up. For them throughout the process.
Well, and you use that phrase, powerful questions or asking powerful questions. I want to come back to that here in just a second, because we're going to talk about specific ways that you do personalize that experience for your clients. But questionnaires is the first thing or first tool that you're using to educate clients for a better experience, kind of indirectly, because you're asking questions, you're getting information, but you're almost educating them via the questions, which is kind of an interesting concept. But then emails, how are you using emails specifically to manage their expectations, to educate them?
Same. I make sure that, especially this is like a booked client, I'm making sure that I keep regular communication with them via email and text message. Sometimes depends on what they choose as their primary way to communicate.
Okay.
But I'll be sending them emails, answering these questions, kind of like you'll have a FAQ page on your website, answering the frequently asked questions. Well, I'll send those bullet points basically in an email that's personal. And we, kind of talk through the things that I want them to be prepared for. So I get really organized about that. Like, I know that I'm going to send a couple of emails before the engagement session, kind of leading them through the process and answering the questions that I know they're going to ask and getting them prepared for the session, I then have a meeting before that session to, have a voice-to-voice, face-to-face conversation about the information that they've received. So that way I can make sure we're on the same page and they've received that information. It is interesting, very, very interesting. Most people don't read a lot of things that you expect them to read.
It's true.
Having that meeting to follow up on, the points that I think that they should have by that time is really important, just to make sure. I don't want to assume that they know and then come to find they didn't read or absorb the information I wanted them to.
I like that, though. I don't think we've had any, 400 and this is episode 481 or something like that I've recorded. I don't know that I've had any photographer frame meetings in that light before, where they're actually using them as a platform for confirmation. The information's already been shared. Now we have the chance to meet in person. And photographers endlessly talk about the significance of being able to meet in person for the sake of connection, which obviously is hugely important. But it's also an opportunity for you, Dauss, you said, to confirm their understanding of the information that you've already shared. That's super, super important. And I really love that that framing of the meeting in that way.
It is. It's not only an opportunity to connect, but like the whole process, I've just learned over my 23 years of shooting weddings that the more information that we can exchange in both directions, the better their experience is going to be after, during the wedding and the whole thing. The better it's going to be, the better the images are going to be, because they're comfortable and there's no, floating question marks above anything. I've had a chance to and with certainty, paint a picture of who I am as a person, an individual, and who I am as a business owner. And they know what to expect as far as the experience and the images and the price point, the whole thing. Like, there's no surprises. So my process is down to a point now, so that they have every bit of information that I need them to have. And I am certain that they've absorbed it, because we get to talk about it. And I work those touch points into the process. So, it's even with that, there's no surprises. They know we're going to meet X number of times before the wedding, and that's what happens.
And how many times do you normally meet with the client prior to the wedding?
It depends on if they book any extra sessions or not. Like, I'm a fashion photographer, so I like to kind of pull as much of my fashion experience into their experience as possible. So I offer like high fashion bridal session or extra opportunity to meet up and get great images. But typically for like a regular experience, it's 4 or 5 times we'll meet.
Wow.
Sometimes it's like just a getting to know you meeting. Like, after they book, they'll get a welcome package, and then they'll get an email with a link to schedule a meetup. And it's not around shooting. It's just let's get together. And I think the email says, let's get together over your favorite drink or treats and get to know one another, kind of thing. And that's an opportunity, just for what it is, to get to know one another.
Yeah.
And they get to see that I'm truly vested in them and their relationship, and the money that they're paying me is truly, going into their experience. So it kind of sets the stage and sets the bar, like, right off the jump.
Wow. Okay. And just as a side note for anybody listening in who didn't realize that Dauss is, as he mentioned, is also a fashion photographer. If you go to Dauss, DAUSSMILLER.com, DaussMiller.com, you'll see Dauss's work. And Dauss, as I'm looking at I have your fashion site pulled up here, and then I also have your wedding site pulled up. This is another example, and I've said this maybe a couple of times in the podcast before, but you are an example of a photographer that I'm surprised doesn't have the notoriety that some photographers do. Your work is stunning, and it's so wide ranging. And yet I don't know, I should be seeing your name up on the list of conference speakers and this kind of thing, sharing about not only your photographic art, but of course your experience in business. It's just really beautiful stuff. For everybody listening in, you're going to want to make sure you follow Dauss. And we mentioned his wedding Instagram earlier, Dauss Photo, DAUSSFOTO. But then also, if you go to DAUSS Miller, Dauss Miller on Instagram, that's the fashion account there. And again, just stunning work, man. Really great stuff.
Thank you, Nathan. I really appreciate that. I really do.
Absolutely.
And I agree. I feel like I should be, in lights and speaking at conferences as well. And honestly, it comes down to how I show up in my marketing to the general public. Like I said, I've got some anxiety things and not good enough things that pop up.
Sure.
So my mindset is a big part of my routine, and I'm also an educator. So in all the photographers that I'm speaking to and teaching, it's all centered around mindset, because I realize how much of an impact that has on where we end up and how successful we can be on both sides of the coin. Our potential, it limits our potential when we have great potential, and it can also catapult us forward to where we need to be if our mindset is in the right spot. So it's something I get to focus on a lot.
Well, I hope that you have more opportunity in the future to be on stage and being able to share with photographers at large. I mean, the industry is so massive these days, and WPP. I think about these conferences, WPPI and PPA. They are not even close to what they used to be, but it's still an opportunity for photographers to get to hear from other photographers who have experience, and hopefully you'll have more opportunity in that regard. But I want to keep moving, because we started with the tools that you're using. Questionnaires, emails, and meetings as touch points. I like that word that you use, to educate, to manage expectations of your clients, potential clients, and clients. Within that, though, as you're kind of getting into that experience, as you book that client and you're working at personalizing that experience that you give to each client, there were a few concepts, again, that you mentioned to me before we started recording today. One was asking powerful questions. This is a phrase that you were using earlier. Then listening, and then consistency in how you show up for the client. These are three ideas that drive this effort at bringing a personalized experience. So yet again, I'd like to touch on each of these. Let's start with asking powerful questions. This is interesting to me, and I'd love for you to give an example. Actually, before we even give me an example of the type of questions that you ask, how do you come up with these questions to begin with? Because it'd be really easy to just be like, what's your wedding date, and what type of dress are you wearing, and what kind of shoes are you wearing, and just ask all the typical questions. To me, that doesn't strike me as a powerful question. How do you come up with yours?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think first off, looking at everyone that we meet and deal with as a person, I think a lot of people lose focus or sight of the fact that, we're in business and we're providing a service. Yes. We need their information and details. Sure. So there's a rough and raw way to do that. And, a square way to do that. But then there's a deeper, more personal way to do that. So really being authentic and having meaningful conversations like you would someone that you're in a relationship with. That's kind of how I look at it. My couples are spending a healthy chunk of change with me. So I owe them the attention to really dig in and to learn about their story. A powerful question would be, to tell me, or asking them, what their favorite memories or vacations are, and where they've been, and how, what they do together as a couple. Those sorts of things are really important for me to learn about them. Sometimes I don't get a direct or specific response, but within the story, I'm getting them into their emotions, and I'm it's so multi-purpose for me. I'm getting I'm getting the information and detail about their relationship. And I'm also, getting to fill in the blanks or checking off the boxes for me of the things that I need to know about them, their relationship, and about their wedding plans. Sure. So it's both a logistics, checking off the box thing, but it's also an emotional relationship connection that gets to build and grow.
Okay, interesting. So powerful questions, and we could say on a very simple level that they are story-driven. When we're exploring the story of the individual, as you said, the human being on the other side of you, we're not just looking at them as a client or a number, but a human being who has a story, and that story drives their choices with regards to what they're looking for in their wedding, certainly the photography. That enables us to come up with more creative, more powerful questions. But then, of course, once you ask those questions, you've got to listen, right? And again, I'm guilty of
and not just listen, but listen to hear.
Yes,
Like
yes.
truly listen to hear, to like with intention to absorb what is spoken in return. Like that's the part, and a lot of people miss that mark.
Yeah.
I hear you, but do you really hear me? Like it's a big distinguishing mark to make.
What is, and it takes, in a world that is fast and that is largely, at least in American culture anyway, represented by short chunks of time where we give attention for just a tiny bit of time, and then suddenly we're squirrel, something's come along, and we're following that. And so I'm wondering if there is a way that you have learned to more intentionally listen, to actually, it's a cliche phrase, we hear it all the time, but truly be present in the conversation. What has enabled you to do that more effectively?
I just set the intention. Like it's important, so I make sure that I'm not distracted, and that I can give them my focus and my attention, and truly listen to hear. And like we said earlier, storytelling and hearing stories and sharing stories is a really, really important part of the process, to connect on an emotional level and find similarities and differences between us as people and our lifestyles, and really connect. And that's so important that it's you don't want to come off of that intention. I don't want to like schedule a meeting or a time to talk when I know I'm going to be distracted, or allow something else to come into the space. I owe them my attention and focus. And
then there's this third element of personalizing the client's experience that you mentioned to me. It seemed very important to you when we were chatting before we started recording, this idea of consistency in the way that you show up for the client. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So being consistent in showing up, period. And then also being consistent in how you show up. And that can be like, in your marketing or in your emails, the tone that you have, like the energy that you're coming from, creating like a consistent experience for them. One of the biggest, it kind of goes into trust, like you want them to be able to trust who you are. So if you show up one day dark and moody, and you're kind of like a different personality than you are when they signed with you or they met you, it kind of throws a red flag. It's right. Like, wait, or how is he going to be on the wedding day? Now I don't, now I'm not certain, like who are we going to be dealing with? So consistency in frequency and also in the tone and energy that you show up is really important. And it's something that I focus on. And for me, it goes back to my morning routines and setting my intentions and, being in the right frame of mind when it's time to have those important meetings or ask those powerful questions or, mark those big check boxes complete.
I want to kind of switch gears just a little bit. Talk to me about gifts for clients. I know that you gift clients, and I'm curious, about a few things. One, when do you give gifts to clients, and maybe what motivates that gift giving? But then I'm also curious too how you choose those gifts to give to the client to continue to maintain this personalization in the client experience.
Yeah, it's a custom thing, so sometimes it changes. It depends on the couple, and it depends also on the information that I've gathered from them. If there's something cool, like I've had some grooms that have been like tequila connoisseurs or into microbreweries or things like that.
Yeah.
So I'll drop little gift cards or a link to a particular distillery or something in an email or a text message, just to let them know that I'm thinking about them and I found this awesome thing that we've talked about. But in general, like the biggest gift that I give is right before the wedding day.
Okay.
And I used to give gifts related to photography. Like I would give, one of their favorite images from their engagement session, a framed metal print or, something like that kind of gives them an opportunity to see the products if they haven't bought them already. So, but then I came off of that a little bit. I would work that in earlier in the experience so that I could do some personal things. But like everything, I try to get as much like as many miles as possible from everything that I do. So the personal gifts that I'll give now are like things that I can include in my lay flats for the wedding day, like a custom ring box or a vintage hand mirror, depending on what my brides are into. Custom mirror or custom hangers have been really popular. I have a local vendor here that does calligraphy, beautiful calligraphy work. So we'll partner and she'll create some custom signage or something like that we get to use in the actual photos for the wedding day. So I typically try to do that right before the wedding, but it can be worked in, anytime during their experience.
Okay. And it just kind of total surprise for them when they get that thing. That's got, like, I can imagine the expression on their face. Like they're just the excitement at that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah. It's just like giving a gift in a relationship.
Yeah.
You'll catch the hint or, you'll put the bait out and they'll answer the question. It's like, ooh, now I know what I can give when this gift giving holiday comes up or whatever it is. And it's usually a complete surprise. Like, oh man, he was really listening when we were talking about what we like to do together. Now we get to do this thing together via our wedding photographer. Wow. That's like a really big deal. So now I know when they think about photography or wedding photography, they're probably going to think about me, because not only do they end up with awesome images, but they had such a unique personal experience with me that I'm going to be the one they think of whenever it comes up.
Yeah, and to our earlier conversation, because you were listening, because you were paying attention, you're able to do that more effectively. That's really good. Speaking of gifts, and I want to kind of close our conversation with this, but something that you do is with your clients is to offer a complimentary anniversary session for your couples. Where did this idea come up with in the first place?
Well, it's something to connect the experience and to extend the experience. So typically in the spring, I'll offer, as my business has grown, have grown, and my client list has grown, it makes the most sense for me to offer a few weekends in the spring, like before wedding season kicks into high gear. And I offer kind of like a mini session experience. And I invite, I'll send out a blast email to all of my past clients and see who's interested in scheduling, a 20 to 30 minute block of time to have a quick, I'll pick a cool, kind of elite location and have everyone meet and go through kind of like a mini session day. The beautiful thing about that is it's like a chance to reconnect and see their families growing and keep in touch. It's also another, sales opportunity, revenue building opportunity. And a lot of times, like if it's the first anniversary session, like their initial complimentary anniversary session, I'll have a gift for them that is from, something that they've learned about me. So I love plants. I can't remember the number, hundreds of plants at my house.
Whoa.
I love plants of all kinds. So usually around their wedding day, I'll take a cutting from one of my plants and then I'll bring it to the anniversary session so I can gift them a living plant. Now, if my client is someone that says I don't have a green thumb, I kill plants, and that, I'll come up with something different. But
sure.
But just another opportunity there. So it's like everything else. It's multi-purpose. It's a great way to connect and be on top of mind when photography comes about, and more revenue opportunity.
Man, what a cool idea, and how thoughtful too to think about getting that plant ready to then give to them as a kind of a representation of their relationship, the beginning of their relationship. That's a really cool thing. Yep. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, this has really turned into an interesting conversation, Dauss. And yet again, I have to thank you for making time for me, for our listeners, for a second episode. Maybe we can do a third at some point, but
man, I'm down.
Well, remind all of our listeners where they can follow you, because I want to make sure that they have the chance to see your work and potentially follow you, even DM you if they've got questions.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Dauss Miller and Dauss Photo, Photo. I'm also on Facebook. You can search my name. And I've got a private group for photographers where I'm providing value and talking through a lot of these things we've discussed, my processes and things that work for me in my business, from marketing through client experience and the whole nine, sharing some golden nuggets in that group. So feel free to reach out to me on Facebook and connect and all of that.
Well, we'll link to all of that in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. For anybody listening in, make sure you take advantage of these resources, because we shared a lot of information today, talking points, books, and of course the social media and website. So we'll put all of that in the show notes, bokehpodcast.com. Thanks once again, Dauss, for hanging out with us.
Thank you, Nathan. Always a great time, man.
Thanks so much, photographers, for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought of the show by leaving a review of the podcast in the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@bokehpodcast.com. Make sure to visit our sponsors, photographersedit.com, custom photo editing for the professional photographer, and miilu.com, that's miilu.com, the simplest way to create and manage timelines and shot lists for the events you're photographing.